in 2014, the poverty rate was 41.8%, and the national literacy rate was just 58.8%, which is lower than the regional average. So one of the problems is the significant imbalance in the economic structure. So despite representing 3% of GDP in 2013, agriculture represented 41% of employment in the country. And furthermore, 85% of farming in the country is subsistence-based. So the area of the economy where the majority of people in Timor Leste are employed has seen an underinvestment. Sorry, it's not working. Thank you. These challenges are made more complicated by the rich linguistic diversity in the country. As you can see from this map, there are over 20 languages continually in use in the country as of now. So in this context, the diversification of the non-oil economy, in which the vast majority of the Timorese people are employed, has become a significant focus for both the government and other organizations operating in the country. So enter our client, Kaebauk Investimentu Finansas, which we'll call KIF. KIF grew out of the microfinance activities of the Timorese NGO Tuburai Metin, which has been working on livelihood promotion in the country since independence. In 2016, KIF was registered or licensed as an other deposit-taking institution by the Banco Central de Timor Leste, and this has allowed it to develop a savings product in addition to microcredit. So its mission is to provide microfinance and allied services for a large number of the poor in a sustainable and regulated manner to improve the quality of life of families and empower women. Therefore, more than a financial service provider, KIF has a social orientation, working towards the broader goal of financial inclusion in the country, in addition to expanding its client base. So, as such, it is currently the country's leading microfinance institution and is named in the Banco Central de Timor Leste's strategy for financial inclusion, along with telecommunications companies, Morris Rassic, which is another microfinance institution operating in the country, and commercial banks as well. And indeed, KIF is well placed for this task due to its geographical reach throughout the country. It has a branch and a field office, or it has a branch in every administrative district in the country, as well as field offices in some rural areas as well. So, to this end, KIF would like to expand its portfolio of financial services that it offers. So it asked us to help strategize the introduction of new products consistent with their mission by exploring 3 specific thematic areas: supporting livelihoods through financial services, payment services, and the use of technology. Upon further research and conversations with KIF, we learned they are specifically interested in leveraging their geographic reach in the country to establish an agent banking system in the country. So in this model, the agent banking model, local entrepreneurs, such as kiosk or shop owners, are trained, technologically enabled, and established as agents to serve as customer service points for KIF clients across the country. Different from mobile banking, in which clients can directly access their accounts and complete transactions on their personal mobile device using USSD codes or a mobile app, as maybe some of you are familiar with. Yes, it's different from this. So while convenient, mobile banking requires approval from appropriate regulators, which we have had difficulty ascertaining the existence of in Timor Leste. The development of a digital platform appropriate for mobile banking, and it is best used in societies where the population is already technologically and financially literate. By contrast, agent banking only requires the agent to be connected to a mobile device on which they can complete transactions for the clients for a small fee. And furthermore, employment of local agents who speak the local language and are familiar with local customs will ease the trust-building process as the local people become accustomed to banking and let alone mobile banking. And then finally, in addition to the agent banking perspective, they asked us to look into the logistics of partnering with the government for delivery of G2P payments. Again, leveraging their geographic reach in the country to expand their role in the country's financial sector.
Thank you. So diving into this quite large task, as master's students are wont to do, we deep dived into the literature. Through the literature, we sort of grabbed out a couple analytical frameworks, and we stumbled upon this that we reframed better for our project, and really encapsulates that what KAF is doing is not happening inside a vacuum, and there's a larger context that's happening here. So if you look at the framework, you can see at the top level, there's households and individuals, livelihood strategies, and livelihood outcomes. At each one of these levels, and nodes, rather, is mediated through what's going on underneath over there. So you got to pay attention to what's happening with your policies, regulations, and institutions, whether it's government, market, communities, your economic and social factors, as well as your startup assets, whether it's human, financial, social, physical, and natural. Of course, there's risk and vulnerability context as well. And importantly for KAF is also the information and communications technology aspect of this as well, so your technical, economic, and social. So at each decision level node, these different forces and factors are mediating the decisions and the outcomes for both the households and individuals, but for the country as a whole. So this is the framework we decided to use in approaching our problem, understanding how we can best do this type of research. So jumping in, we wanted to start at a high level, asking our research questions, working our way down to the different tasks that KAF was asking. So at the top, we're asking what barriers exist to accessing financial services in order to promote livelihood development. So getting at KAF's mission for livelihood promotion, sort of that bigger umbrella. Then working one step down, given Timor Leste's current infrastructure, what strategy for financial inclusion should they adopt? Is mobile banking the best strategy for where they are right now? Then moving one level down again, with and without the research conclusions of the previous question, how can KAF coordinate these social security payments, or these G2P payments, in conjunction with a broad array of other financial services? So that gets down to the payment services level and how they can coordinate these things. But before scaling up, we also wanted to make sure we added another element to ask what problems exist currently with the model they have before they scale up. So can we identify any pitfalls that are currently happening to make sure we don't bring them with us as we scale up this model going throughout and moving forward with KAF. So the methodology we developed was a qualitative methodology focusing on focus groups, interviews, and semi-structured interviews. We managed to interview current clients, non-clients, G2P recipients, as well as we had an interesting opportunity to interview some university students, which weren't a part of our initial research design, but given the opportunity, we decided to take it because we could speak to students about how they use mobile phones, the different infrastructure, and where technology use is going for the next generation of loan recipients. We also spoke to experts and practitioners, as well as KAF staff. Overall, we spoke with 73 individuals and representatives from 14 organizations. So once we got into the field, we conducted 2 weeks of field research in Timor Leste. As you can see from the map over here, the purple areas, often at the peril of our own joints, are the parts of the country that we managed to get into. And so you can see that we covered quite a broad array of both urban and rural populations, giving us some interesting findings covering both circumstances. Moving on, some interesting findings from our fieldwork. From the clients, we interviewed 65% female, 35% male. Largely, the loans are being used for business investment, with a small amount being used for education, smoothing income, or home construction. Importantly, the average loan size was about $1,500, and on this loan, the percentage, or the interest rate, is 18%, which is competitive with the banks, which give out loans at about 20%, but still rather high. And this sort of highlights the realities of being a microfinance institution and being for-profit, in trying to get out to these structural areas and structural issues. You've got to reach the clients, you've got to develop these agent networks, and there's a lot of barriers in terms of getting out the money and getting the money back, which is reflected in these sorts of interest rates. So there's a lot of challenges in sort of dealing with the clients. With the non-clients, there are also quite a few interesting findings. Several of them noted using a savings account with the Timorese National Bank, citing brand loyalty and also country pride, using a Timorese institution, which is important for KAF being a Timorese institution, that this is something that people are aware of and concerned about. As well as there was quite a high want for learning about financial services and being educated about these things. And interestingly, everyone we spoke to for domestic money transfers was using an informal system for sending money around the country. Often it was family members giving money to a bus driver, that bus driver going down and then handing the money off to the end recipient. So there's a lot of opportunities for getting in and dealing with some inefficiencies and grabbing some service fees as well from that type of an informal delivery system and trying to make that more efficient as well. Importantly for the non-clients and the clients, we spoke to G2P recipients as well, and a lot of them mentioned struggles in terms of getting their Social Security payments, whether it was long wait times once they got down to where they were receiving their payments, as well as long distance travel to get there, or just difficulty in getting their payments, given that this is old age payments a lot of times as well, and current payments, and there can be some struggles there. And right now that's only being delivered through the BNCTL as well as BNU through a memorandum with the government, so there's some space as well there for improvement. Moving on sort of the ICT side of things, everyone we spoke to had a phone. This seemed like sort of a silly question as we were asking it. Everybody was just like, yes, we have a phone. And the signal was actually quite envious of Canadians because the country's mobile infrastructure is quite robust. And everybody had strong signal on their device. Many said that they use more than one telecommunications provider, often taking advantage of different promotions that these different providers will have. You know, swapping in different SIM cards and jumping from one promotion to the other. So it was quite easy to get into these SIM cards. 73% of clients and 38% of non-clients said they would feel comfortable with an agent completing their transaction with mobile or out in the field, but many cited that they would still feel most comfortable if they still received some form of paper receipt to record their transaction to make sure they had something they could hold on to. So given all this and this time that we spend in country, we developed some policy and business recommendations, which I'll hand off to Claire to enumerate.
Sure. So the policy recommendations, we have 3 of them to start out with. And this is really recognizing that KAF is not independent of the policy environment that it exists in. So our first recommendation, and the most broad one, is to leverage KAF's very important role in the country to develop and capitalize on the existing connections they have with the government and key policymakers in order to lobby for broader policies that increase the overall demand for financial services in the country. So right now there's quite a lack of movement on behalf of the government to make soft investments into areas like agriculture, and so that leaves a real lack of capital for KAF to ride on the back of in terms of adding value to agriculture or scaling up their agri-loan program. KAF can certainly bridge the gaps on the ground on the back of government investment and provide policy support for developing the key economic sectors and really capitalize on the fact that they are the main institution with rural access throughout the country. Our second policy recommendation gets at the G2P payments. Those are the Social Security payments delivered to veterans, disabled people, and the elderly. KAF will need to network with the key policymakers in order to obtain a memorandum of understanding or a different kind of policy agreement in order to deliver the GTP payments. And again, you can really focus on their access in rural areas. And of course, given elasticity of demand in rural areas, either through pilot projects or economic studies, KAF can glean a small transaction fee from each of these in order to be advantageous to their business model. Our third and final policy recommendation is the development of an effective national credit bureau and enhanced regulatory framework for lending in financial institutions. So right now there's a huge drain on KAF staff going out into the field in order to authorize larger loans and conduct background checks, really by speaking to neighbors and community leaders in order to make sure this is a trustworthy person and that their business can be verified in order to pay future loan installments. So a national credit bureau would allow KAF to tap into an accredited verification system in order to expedite this process, which will then alleviate that drain on human resources, as well as make the client experience better because it'll be a faster process. And so, of course, then there's less travel time and demands on the KAF staff, and better overall government regulation and availability of credit statuses can make this a more fair process for other micro-lending organizations in the country. Moving on to our business strategy recommendations. So currently, KAF relies predominantly on word of mouth to reach new clients. So that's neighbors talking to neighbors, friends talking to friends. And there are cost-effective marketing strategies that KAF can capitalize on in order to obtain new clients within what they have available in order to lend out. Of course, the challenge is that they do need to utilize pictorial elements or be verbally based either through the radio or local television stations, and that is due to the linguistic diversity in the country, as well as low literacy rates, especially in the rural areas where KAF wants to move further into. Another option that they haven't looked into yet is Facebook. We did write this before the recent Facebook scandal, so take a grain of salt now. We understand that Facebook advertising can be quite cost effective, and 1/3 of the Timorese population uses Facebook regularly, so that's something that they could look into. As well as Timor Leste, just coming out of sort of an armed conflict really does rely on trust between communities. So in-person marketing events could be very advantageous for KAF to go to. These could be market events in the smaller communities or other public spaces in order to do more in-person marketing events. To still rely on word of mouth, but from the official KAF source, as well as increase their brand recognition throughout the country. Our next business strategy recommendation, and we've sort of talked about this before, is that there's a huge drain on human resources for travel time, as well as verifying new loans. And the roads in Timor Leste, especially during wet season, are quite rough, as we experience. And it takes a very long time to go from the capital out to the branch offices. And that's what's happening right now when they need to verify a larger loan or to conduct monitoring and evaluation of the branch performances. So a recommendation that we have is using the local staff expertise at the branch level. This can be done through either capacity building training that KAF could offer, or they can subsidize courses for their staff members to take at the local universities in order to be accredited in more financial literacy and to build more trust with what the branches are doing, so less monitoring from Dilly directly. And of course, there would still need to be randomized audits by the head branch in order to make sure that this was going according to the KAF business plans and protocols. Our next recommendation has to deal with the old age loan limit. So currently the upper age limit for KAF loans is 55 years old. And I'm sure some of the older members of the audience would agree that that seems a little arbitrary. And so we would recommend that this could be expanded to at least 60 years or older, as long as the recipient was still going through the same verification processes and still had the ability to have a business that could make the installment payments on loans. Our next business strategy recommendation has to deal with the agent banking that we discussed and that KAF had specifically asked us to look into. So the agent requirement said that the agent is literate, a trustworthy member of society, connectable to a network, able to store cash in a secure location, and able to be trained by KAF in order to conduct client verification and conduct the transactions. And a lot of the kiosk owners that we talked to throughout our interviews, small business owners, were very excited about this, as long as the incentives were to be correct and as long as there were to be proper training for them. And of course, the benefit for KAF is, again, reducing that travel time for their staff members, and also increasing the connections with communities and really helping KAF delve into that domestic money transfer, which from our understanding really seems to be in-person transfers and people traveling or entrusting bus drivers. And of course, they can provide a receipt, which seems to be a very important component in the country. And then, again, the frequent monitoring and evaluation as an anti-fraud and quality control measure would be required. So the next and final business strategy recommendation is related to mobile banking, which again, KAF had asked us specifically to look into the viability of. So either as a USSD technology or as a mobile application. One of the major hurdles of this is, of course, the linguistic diversity and literacy rates in the country. A lot of people we did interview had smartphones in order to use an app, but a lot of people said they didn't really feel that comfortable using it on their own. So, and as a very first step, KAF does have a savings account system, but has not been scaled up to the whole country yet. And very few interviews that we conducted mentioned using a KAF savings account. So before they can even have a mobile banking system, they do need to have their own savings accounts in order to withdraw that on their own. So that's really the first step before mobile banking is embarked on. And as a second step related to that, our suggestion is to start with agent banking first, combined with the marketing and brand promotion in order to obtain more clients, as well as to conduct financial literacy training. So a lot of interviewees cited that they were interested in learning more about financial services. So really before mobile banking would be effective, people need to understand what these services are and why they're beneficial for them and their small business. So we can start with the agent banking first, especially marketing in the more rural areas, and then roll out mobile banking if it seems viable once the agent banking network is in place. And that will allow KAF to learn and adapt through that experience, as well as being able to keep an eye on competition. So one of the things KAF is concerned about is that other commercial banks might move into this mobile banking sector before they do. And certainly in other developing countries, this has been a very hot area of development. So KAF can be wary of their competition, but as of right now, it doesn't look like anything concrete is happening, so they can take their time to make sure that this is a viable business strategy for them, and to be able to provide the community training that is necessary for this to be effective.
Right, so just sort of summing up everything that's been said on sort of the policy and business recommendations. As you can see, we have separated policy and business on this slide, but it's important to keep in note that these interact with each other in very important ways, as sort of referenced by analytical framework. But just summarizing, lobby to increase the demand for financial services, of course looking at that Social Security and GDP payment delivery and approval, as well as lobby for that credit bureau and improved regulations. And then the business recommendations, reading left to right, sort of low-hanging fruit to the more difficult on increased marketing, human resource and capacity development, increase old age, and then move into the Asian banking sphere and make sure you get that right before moving into any potential mobile banking options from there. And from that, we welcome any questions or comments, and thank you for your time.
Questions?
Well, thanks very much. I really appreciated learning about this. I hadn't been aware of the thinking around agent banking. I wonder, though, the Indonesian branchless banking experiment is now fully 3 years underway, and I suspect that this Timorese microfinance institution is quite aware of this branchless banking program across Indonesia, i.e. it's right next door. What do you take from, so far, the branchless banking scheme in Indonesia and the challenges it has faced for your thinking? For example, in Indonesia, much wealthier country than Timor Leste, remains largely unbanked. And agent banking is supposed to address these problems of unbanked, but there's been all sorts of issues around the agents, and then subsequently all sorts of issues around verification of identities by financial institutions. Those are two key problems in the branchless banking. How do you suggest the microfinance institution in Timor address those issues?
And indeed, this is one of the areas that they asked us to look into in terms of being concerned about competition, because BRI, which is the Indonesian bank, one of the Indonesian banks that's doing branchless banking in Indonesia, also operates in Timor Leste. And also there's other banks that have been looking into this option. That's why we've said that they need to start slowly. So really it's about, they want to rapidly get out into the rest of the country, and they already are well placed with their branch offices in each of the administrative districts. But it's really about capacity development of the local branches and of the agents to verify the agent's identity, train them well, make sure that they're trustworthy, and that might involve using the local government to kind of verify their identities. And again, it'll take lobbying the government to institute a national credit bureau so that they can verify identities of the clients that want to take out loans. So I guess the answer is that it is a very difficult process, and it'll take, that's why we're really emphasizing the importance of kind of taking time to build the capacity of the local agents and the local branches so that, so that when it's done, it can be done in an effective manner. And so, because if you roll it out quickly, it could just be chaos. And so we do think that they're well placed to start this, but it'll take time, both from them, training and capacity development, as well as lobbying the government to get the broader framework in place for this kind of future of financial development, financial inclusion to develop, if that answers your question.
Well, thank you very much. I have a second question if no one else is going to ask.
Go for it.
Go ahead, Stephen.
So my second question would be about your recommendation for a national credit bureau.
Okay.
Fairly standard national credit bureau, no reason not to advocate for it. However, it doesn't seem to address the question your client has asked, since it's unlikely that most of their clients, both now and in the future, assuming they expand their services through these kinds of programs, will ever be banked. So why suggest this? I mean, isn't most of the current thinking around mobile banking suggesting, in fact, ideas of basically AI based on telco data to actually develop credit profiles for individuals so that, in a sense, you wouldn't need to think about a credit bureau, that there would be alternatives to such institutions for precisely the unbanked?
Yeah, that's, thank you for bringing that up. And if Timor Leste found itself in a position to sort of hyper jump over that process and go straight to an AI process of sort of doing that checking, that would be wonderful in such a country that has such high technology access. But it's in keeping with, while it isn't directly what was asked for us by KAF, as policy students and as we wanted to take the opportunity to look at that broader policy structure and take a step back from what KAF was asking us, deal with what they were doing, but also see where we can help them in that broader policy context that maybe wasn't strictly asked for. And with the development of a credit bureau or a national bureau, it can reduce the amount of time as well for them where they're going around verifying these sorts of things. So it is something that they can lobby for in the interim that will help them in their day-to-day business as well, and something that we flagged throughout our research that might not have been a direct ask from them. If anyone wants to add on to that.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I had a quick question. You're talking, like you spoke about the capacity building as well, and did you guys look at the approximate cost that would be involved for KIF in this process? Because if they are all over the country and in all the districts, I'm assuming if they are going to build capacity, it's going to cost them, and how much would it be?
We didn't look at the specific cost of what running a capacity building training program would be, or the university cost, but what we do know is that they are spending a lot of money sending their staff from the capital. For every large loan that needs to be verified, a credit officer from the capital in Dili travels to the branch in order to conduct the verification. So just on that small part of the map where we had as purple, we only traveled as the crow flies, not very far.
No.
And it took us 4 hours on basically just mud riverbanks. So there's a lot of money in gas and all their transportation resources used up in order to travel out there. So we don't know the exact figure, but comparatively to how they're running things right now, I would only imagine that it would be less expensive for them to build capacity at the local level.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation, guys. I was just wondering, so from a business standpoint, when you look at what they were doing in terms of microlending, did you feel that there was more tendency towards convergence with conventional banking, or are they really seeking to diversify in terms of maintaining, their distinction? And because I'm not a specialist in microcredit, but I saw the difference in interest rate between 20% and 18%. On $1 trillion loan, yes, it makes a huge difference, but if I'm microlending, smaller amounts, it might not be as significant. So what do you feel that there's a real effort to continue to diversify, or do you feel that there's more of moving towards convergence with?
I guess their focus is different than commercial banks. So, in a way, they want to diversify their products that they have. In a way, this is moving towards convergence with the ultimate idea would be to offer all the products that are available to us or to anyone. But because they specifically focus on low-income clients, so it's a completely different context. And these are clients who won't be able to secure a loan with a commercial bank because the verification standards, the employment standards are much different and they're higher requirements. So in a way, maybe long-term vision is to converge and allow low-income people to have the same opportunities as the high-income people or people anywhere. But they do have this specific focus because they're not just a financial service provider, they are a livelihood promotion, or they're connected to a livelihood promotion institution. So they have this focus on low-income clients. So they're dealing with a different context, and that is also why the interest is so high as well, because they're taking on some of that risk as well. So it's kind of a long-term process. If that makes sense.
And just go. Oh, sorry.
No, please.
Oh, just going off of that, they do have Tuba Raimetan, which is what Joanna was alluding to. is a livelihood promotion NGO, which is what KAF grew out of. So it's sort of its sister organization, and they do share a lot of staff. One of our translators was from that side of the organization, and that's really where they're hoping the agri-loan portfolio will be branched out of. So they provide agriculture extensionists, and they sort of teach them how to do agricultural cooperatives, and then provide the loans through KIF in that way. So they definitely work in tandem. I think they're really going in all directions in terms of wanting to provide all financial services and wanting to provide as many social services as they can as well. The goal for them will to be able to do that efficiently and in order to keep competition from edging in on that as well.
Thank you.
My turn?
Yes.
I don't recall from the early slide, how much opportunity did you have to kind of get into the government culture? Because a number of your recommendations are lobby government. So I'm kind of going, what's the policy-making culture in the government, and how do you advise your client? There's the kind of business strategy side, and there's the policy side. What's your sense of that?
That's a great question. So right now, the KF is part of the central bank strategy for financial inclusion. So they do have aims for sort of the central bank side of things. In terms of the wider government and policy context, we spoke with representatives from the Ministry of Social Solidarity on the G2P payment side of things. But we also spoke to a lot of experts and different developmental specialists who've been in the country for quite some time, and they told us sort of the policy context and also where policy happens. A lot of times it happens informally. It happens with making yourself known, making yourself marketed in different areas, and sort of what your goals are, and working in tandem with these types of partners. While we were in the country as well, there was also some difficulties because the government was struggling to form a coalition. So there had been a recent election which had gone off smoothly, which the UN was very happy about. But they were still struggling to gather a coalition, so things were a bit up in the air. And anytime we managed to nail down a lobby maker, a policy maker, or anything like that, it was always very much just, this is what we want to do, this is the type of work and mandate we want to have, but things are up in the air at the moment and things get moved around. So there is space to get in. There are channels that KF can operate in, especially as the premier microfinance in the country that have been known for quite some time. So there is that context to get involved and lobby, but
So there's quite a strong public service then, and
depending on where you're coming in.
So, sorry, I'll just take, from talking to the experts in the country, one of the things they said was Timor Leste, because there was so much UN involvement at the beginning of their history, has a very robust policy framework. However, the actual ability and willingness to implement all the things that they say is lower than the aspirations they set for themselves. So just like in the rest of the country, trust building and one-on-one personal relations continue to be really important in the government. And so that's where that's part of our marketing strategy, is to part of being able to lobby the government and get these things done is to raise the profile of KIF in the country as an important stakeholder, so that they can kind of move in on these things and make them happen. If that makes sense.
thanks. That's helpful.
You did meet bilateral agencies, multilateral agencies like ADB, World Bank. What role do they have in pushing this agenda of financial inclusion?
So speaking with the ADB and some of these other organizations, right now, the ADB especially, their focus right now is infrastructure. They've got blinders on to anything else at the moment, and they're very much, number one problem in Timor Leste right now is roads. And we're going to be working with the government and working through our funds to try and finance infrastructure development, especially roads. So where they fit in with this whole thing is to sort of deal with the connectivity and lowering the barriers in these areas. They aren't necessarily jumping right in at financial inclusion, but they're going at these bigger infrastructure projects and some of these bigger, get these done before you can go to the next sort of step and lower these transaction costs, if you will. That's sort of an economic way of saying it.
I actually had a comment on that one. Most of the debate at the moment in both Australia and China about Timor Leste is about infrastructure and last mile problems, and it's a very hot debate right at the moment, with accusations flying fast and furious between the Australians and the Chinese about who's doing what and what should they or should not be doing in Timor Leste around infrastructure. And that's why I was struck by your very powerful recommendations, I thought, around social marketing. And I really think you need to make a bit more of that, particularly around these last mile issues. The key to Timor-Leste's future clearly has got to be addressing those last mile issues. And at this point, stressing differences at a national policy level, either within politicians' circles or development donors, isn't going to do it if they're not going to address those last mile questions. And you have a platform here to speak to those last mile issues, pointing out just how difficult it will be to do anything without addressing those last mile issues. So